Hey, this is Andrew Kearns, and today we are looking at 4 steps to make your subjects pop in Lightroom. We're going to go through step by step to go from this to this. It's easy to follow along, and we'll get right into it after a quick plug. At the time this video is being posted, Wildest is having a sale. It's called the Wildest Pass, where you can get access to all of their courses for a whole year. That's 21 courses with several hours of instruction, all taught by incredibly talented artists. I've taught 2 courses with them myself, and you'll get access to those, as well as all the other courses for a year for the price of $3.99. And they've never done something like this, so get it while it's hot. And if you're watching this after the fact, you can still get any of the courses linked below. And with that, let's get into the edit. First things first, I'm going to get a solid edit start. So I'm just going to be in the first panel here, affecting exposure, contrast, highlight, shadows, all that. I'll speed it up here real quick as I edit through. What I'm looking for here is to create a nice contrast between the white truck and the background. So since the truck is white, I'm going to make a darker background. The first thing I want to do is shape the light around the truck, and how I'm going to do that is through gradient filters. It's going to be very simple. I'm just going to go like this, and I'm going to create another one down here. And so really quick, what this one up here is doing right here, if you hover over that, it shows where it's affecting. And if you look over here, it's just a little bit of an exposure bump. I'm going to keep it very subtle. And with this one, I'm actually going to bring it down. -2 looks good. I'm going to take it down here a little bit. I'm going to hit the O key to see where it's affecting. So this is a great start. It's already looking pretty solid, and that's just due to the nice lighting in the image. But what's really going to get the job done is the brush tool. If you don't know what the brush tool is, it allows you to literally just paint onto an image. You can see right there where I painted. Wherever I'm painting is going brighter, and I can make adjustments to it like brightness, temperature, adjust the whites or the darks. It's a very useful tool, and I actually already went through and targeted the tint. You can see it there. The truck right there, and the logo right here. I also blacked out my friend's license plate. With that, let's start on the truck. The first thing to do is to create a nice brighter and darker contrast between the subject and the background. Since the truck is white in this case, that means the background behind it will work very well if it's darker. So I'm just going to brighten up the truck a bit. Not too much though. And then maybe the tint as well. That's looking good. And I'm also going to take the overall exposure down. One thing you can do, and that I usually do in my workflow, is I'll click on exposure right here, click on the word, and then you see this thing pop up, modify with plus and minus keys. So what that means is anything you click on, any word you click on here, you can do that with highlights, blacks, whites, whatever. You can adjust it with the plus and minus keys. So I'm just hitting plus and minus, and if I hold shift, minus, and plus, it does a bigger jump. It's pretty handy, so I'm just going to find something I want, and I'm going to come back in here. By the way, the shortcut for the brush tool is the K key. I'm going to select this again, select the Tacoma, brighten it up a bit. You don't want to overdo it. I may try just messing with the shadows and the contrast and stuff here too. Just want to keep it pretty subtle. That was a nice change right there with the blacks. It created a good contrast, and then I can target the white and the highlights to bring that up a little bit more. Maybe the shadows up again, and just the overall exposure slightly nudged. So that's looking pretty solid there. I'm going to just come down here. That's without it. That's with it. Come up to the tint here, brighten it up slightly. I think I'm going to go hit the minus key and take the overall exposure of the image down. Remember when we clicked it earlier, we can still do that. Take down the highlights a bit. Go back to the K key and select the truck. You can get real meticulous with it, but after I brighten up this tint, we'll just leave it at that for now. So right here is before all the brush adjustments, and here it is with all the brush adjustments. That's before. That's after. That's already looking so much better, and we have just begun. The next thing we'll do here is adding sharpness and clarity to the truck, as well as taking away from the background. And I have a certain technique to take it away from a background, but first we will do the truck, the tent, the logo. And all we're doing here is simply selecting each one and messing with the sharpness, the clarity, all of that. I'm going to add some sharpness to the truck here, maybe a bit of clarity, and see what that does. It kind of brightens it up a bit, so I might do that and then take down the exposure slightly. Just doing small changes as I do all this stuff. Don't be afraid to jump around a little bit. Add a bit of sharpness to the tint. I shot this at 2.8, you can see here, so the tint is going to be slightly out of focus, which is okay. But we can add a bit of clarity to it to create a nice contrast, to pop out a little bit. See what texture does here. Yeah, I like what texture's doing here to the grill. It looks very crisp and sharp, very commercial. Once again, I'm going to take the exposure down just a little bit, not too much. I just want to make sure I'm keeping it real subtle here. The truck is looking almost a bit too sharp, and I think that's due to the texture here. I'm going to take it down to like 20 or so. Yeah, it looks a little more clean there. And one other thing I'll do here is this noise right here. So it's kind of confusing. If you take it down, it actually adds more noise. You can zoom in here and see that. And if you take it up, it takes away the noise. Little contradictive, but basically you want it to go up if you're trying to remove the noise. But you don't want it to go too much, otherwise it looks fake. But we'll put it at like 49 and just see how that looks as a whole. So our subject here, the truck, is looking real sharp, but what I want to do now is take away some of the clarity and sharpness from the background. You could do this one of several ways. You could go in and again, you could just paint this whole background right here and then do it that way, but that's just going to take a long time. You're going to have to finesse it. I'm going to show you a little shortcut here. We're going to select this right here, the radio filter. The shortcut for that is Shift M. We're going to make a big circle around the truck here and rotate it a bit this way. You notice right now it's just affecting the truck. If you come down here and click this invert, or I guess unclick the invert button, you can see now it's affecting not the truck. It's affecting the background, and it is affecting the truck a little bit, but that should be fine. We'll see how it looks. We can also take the feathering down a bit. That's looking good. The area that will be affected now is this red area, remember, so we're just looking at the background here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the clarity out of the background. I'll show you what it looks like with it. You can see that it just pops out the flowers. It makes those trees really sharp, and it kind of makes the image look a bit almost HDR in a way. We don't want that. We're going to take some clarity out of the image, and we'll take out some sharpness. And when I keep saying taking out of the image, I mean the background rather. And we'll take out some texture from the background as well. Cool. We'll see how that looks. So again, we're affecting this area. I think you'll see it most in the flowers here. So we'll turn it off and then on. You can see a very subtle change in the flowers there. We can maybe even go more. Oh, I accidentally added texture. I meant to take it away. Cool. So this is after that adjustment, and then this is before. It's very subtle, but it does make a difference. You could probably honestly do more, like maybe less sharpness, less clarity. It might be too subtle, but I think we can leave it at that. That's the before. That's the after. Last thing is we'll sharpen up this logo a bit, add a little clarity, a little texture to it, a little sharpness. Just make it pop out there. So that's without it, and that's with it. That's looking pretty good, and with that we'll do the last thing, which is the complementary colors. My goal here is to create a blue sky with warm shadows and then a warm-ish truck. I don't want to make the truck super warm, but yeah, we'll first start with the local adjustments, the brush tool. I'm going to make the truck just slightly up in the temperature, not too much. And then also mess with the tint, just using the arrow keys after clicking on the number here. You can use the arrow keys holding shift. You can go big jumps. If you don't hold shift, you can do little nudges. Cool, that's looking good. It's looking a bit more cohesive versus that. I like that look. And I'm going to come into probably the tone curve after this. So the tone curve is one of my favorite panels. It's very powerful and there's a lot to learn, but I will just show you simply how to get different colors out of it, and we'll start with the blue channel. I'm going to create 3 points right there, there, and there. And basically this is the highlights up here and this is the shadows. If you select right here and adjust it, I'm holding Alt and Shift to drag it slowly and keep it on that line. You can see it affects more of the midtones. The shadows are pretty unfazed, same with the highlights. And if I click down here, the shadows will be much more affected. I'm hitting Command Z to undo that, and then up here, the highlights. So same thing with here. If you're in the blue channel and you come down here and you take blue out of it, it's going to add yellow in. So as I take it down, watch the shadows here. You see it goes very yellow there. That looks bad. Undo. Same with the midtones. If I bring in some yellow or take out some blue, and also if I put in some blue, you can see it gets added in there. So same with the highlights. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to see what I like here. I think I'm going to just add a touch of blue in the highlights. I'm going to bring a bit of warmth into the midtones. The truck is more on the midtone side of things. It has some highlights coming through and obviously some deep shadows as well, but I think I'm going to just keep it a little more on the warm side, and then also take this down as well. The shadows, adding some yellow in there. So I'll just turn this off and then back on. Pretty subtle. I'm going to come into the red panel here and do the same thing. I'm going to click on this first one and I'm going to add in red to the highlight, see how I like that. Take it out, see how I like that. The cyan color is a bit intense, but I do want a little bit of it, so maybe just a very subtle amount. Right there looks fine. It's very subtle. You can barely tell. Maybe I'm the only one who can tell, but we'll go to the midtones here and do the same thing, see what we like. I'm going to leave the shadows as is because I'm going to come into the green. As I take it down, you see the pink gets added in. I want to add a more earthy tone to it, so I'm going to keep it pretty subtle. I do not want to overdo this. Cool. That's looking pretty good. I'll zoom in a little bit. This is off and this is on. That might be a bit too subtle, so I'm going to come into the blue here and push it up a bit. Come into the red or green. Maybe add a little green in. I'm just kind of eyeing it here. And then in this red channel, just messing with it, eyeing it. So this is before. You can see it a little bit more there. This is after. And you may like the before better. That's totally fine. I think for the purpose of popping out the subject here, which is the truck, that pops it out a little better, and we can go into it and keep making adjustments after those curves were done. So coming in, selecting it, upping the exposure slightly, adding a touch of warmth into the truck, and maybe messing with the tint as well. Great, that's looking slick. From here, we'll go into the color grading panel. You can click on it, or you can hit Command 4 as the shortcut. And I think I'm just going to emphasize what we've already done. So adding a bit of bluish purple into the highlights. Adding a touch of warmth in the midtones, like right there. And then I want to be very careful adding too much to the shadows because it's affecting so much of the image. I think that actually looks pretty good, adding a touch of whatever you would call this color, turquoise. It's kind of contrary to what we were doing, but I think it helped the image just slightly. It's very, very subtle. Again, this is just trial and error, testing things, seeing how it comes out. I'm going to use these sliders down below that affects the luminance of each of these areas. Then I'll come down here to the blending and balance tool. I'm not too sure what blending does, but I do usually use the balance. And what that does is if you push it more toward the highlights, it takes more of the highlight color on the image, and more of the shadows, takes more of the shadows on. So I'm going to push it a little more on these shadows. I'm also going to make the shadows slightly more warm. Not too much though. Maybe a little more saturation to them. It's pretty light right now. And maybe emphasize a little more saturation in the blue. There, you can see that a lot more now. So that's all the way to the left. That's all the way to the right. So I want to hover right around here somewhere. Awesome. So that's without that. that's with it. Again, just a bunch of very subtle things. Like, it's not a ton I'm doing at once. It's a lot of very subtle things adding up together to create a nice color contrast, as well as just popping out that subject that much more. And to do that even more so, we'll go Shift M to the radio filter we created. Again, this is only affecting the background. And we're gonna come down here, or come up here to temperature, and just take a little bit out, make it a bit cooler. Maybe mess with the tint too, see what that generates. Awesome. So this is before. No pop out in the subject at all other than the bright lights. And that is after. Very clean. The subject is very clear. And we could go in here and do a bunch more changes to it. I might just do that, going back through everything we've done, through the brighter, darker stuff, through the sharpening and clarity, as well as through the coloring. Make some touch-ups here and there, and I'll show you what it looks like after. And here we are. I really like this outcome. I think the subject pops really well. Here's the before. And then here's the after. And I didn't do too many changes, but as I sped it up there, we started right here. And then I just did a few things, like brightened the tint, did some work in the HSL panel here, which is Command 3, and added some sharpness, or took some sharpness away from the truck. It looked a little too fake, brightened up the tint. Again, here's the before, after, and then here is the before and after side by side, looking pretty damn good. And there it is side by side right there as well. So that's that. I think that's a pretty solid edit. That subject's popping. It looks very commercial, and I'm very pleased with it. I think that might go in the portfolio. So hope that helped you out. Again, look at the exposure, look at the sharpness values, and then look at the colors. See if you can get some good complementary colors going. Keep it subtle on everything, and boom, you'll get stuff like this. So thanks for tuning in, and like, comment, subscribe, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments, leave any feedback, and all that jazz.